Welcome to another TAS Academy HVAC training video. What should my pressures be? Answers to that and a few other things. I'm your host, Randall S. Ripley, Technical Support Manager and Trainer at Total Air Supply. Air conditioning is not a theory. It is a collection of scientific facts that combines physics, chemistry, and earth science. Science involves proven scientific facts that are repeatable anywhere in the world. For example, pure water will freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius and boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius anywhere in the world at sea level. As with any science, you must master the scientific principles, terminology, and mathematical relationships to fully understand what is happening. It will always come back to that. What should my pressures be? Is by far the most asked question during the cooling season I have received in my 21 plus years of working in tech support. It is usually asked in the context of the tech wants to verify if his charge is correct by verifying if his pressures are correct. This is not a charging method. There is a simple calculation that a technician can do to get an idea of whether their pressures are close to what they should be. Of course, the technician should verify airflow first and have some basic knowledge of how the unit works. To calculate what your pressure should be, you will need to understand design temperature difference, the PT chart, and a few more things. When you turn an AC system on, you will get pressure and temperature readings based on the conditions at the time it is turned on. The system in this slide is operating at design conditions, which is your AHRI design conditions of indoor air is 75 degrees. As you see here, return air, humidity 50%, and our outdoor air is 95. And this is provided, we have to know the refrigerant type and charge, airflow. If your airflow isn't correct, nothing will be correct. Evaporator and condenser coils, design temperature difference, return air temp entering the evaporator coil, outdoor air temp at condenser, and several other things. Those all determine whether this unit is going to operate correctly or not at a given set of conditions. Checking and setting airflow matters. Without the correct amount of airflow, none of your numbers will be correct. You need 400 CFM per ton for AC, 450 for heat pump, unitary equipment. These systems are built on the principles of heat transfer. Let's consider the following example and the difference between an undercharge and low evaporator airflow. Both have low discharge and suction pressures. Both have low motor amps. The difference is undercharge has high superheat and low subcooling, which means that the high superheat is indicative of lack of refrigerant, and low subcooling is also indicative of no or not much liquid to subcool. Low evaporator airflow has low superheat and high subcooling, which is the opposite. We don't have enough airflow going across the coil with the amount of heat needed to boil the refrigerant off fully. So Where is the refrigerant? It shows in the high subcooling because it's backing up in the condenser. And that's the importance of setting your airflow and knowing your airflow is correct, because an undercharge and low evaporator airflow, that is a slight difference, and that's it. First and foremost, this is not a method to verify the refrigerant charge. The only way you should be verifying refrigerant charge is by subcooling when using a TXV metering device, target superheat when using a fixed orifice piston metering device, or weighing the charge into the system. See the condenser installation manual for complete charging instructions. Calculating your low and high side pressures lets you know where they should be and gives you a number to compare what you're seeing on your gauges with. This information is needed when using a troubleshooting chart like the example to the right. Before we get started, in today's video, we will be discussing what you need to know and do to calculate your low and high side gauge pressures. We will assume that the refrigerant type and charge is correct. All filters, the blower wheel, and coils are clean, and all dampers are open. The airflow has been measured, and required nominal airflow of 400 CFM a ton for AC has been set, or the 450 CFM per ton for the heat pump. That all other functional parts are working correctly. Obviously, if there are issues with the system, it can cause your numbers to be off and be an indicator of a problem. You will find almost all equipment manufacturers have identical evaporator operating characteristics depending on their classification. This is due to the design criteria governed by design conditions in the AHRI and industry procedures for testing. And some of those things are fins per square inch, rows of coils, multiple refrigerant distribution points to the evaporator to maximize efficiency. At a nominal 400 CFM per ton for AC or 450 for heat pump, all evaporators have to have similar operating characteristics to remove the same amount of heat from the same amount of air under the same load conditions. It comes down to physics of time, temperature difference, and turbulence. Design temperature difference. Both the evaporator and condenser coils have their own design temperature differences between the air entering the coil and the saturated refrigerant temperature, which is roughly the temperature of the middle of the coil. The design temperature differences can be found on job submittals or published by manufacturers, but technicians in the field are often relying on rules of thumb. So here we see a typical evaporator, R410A 10 to 20 SEER. The saturation temperature of the refrigerant boiling off in the evaporator will be 40 degrees, and the corresponding pressure will be 118 psig. And we see that as 10 to 12 SEER, and that's showing us that our return air is 75 degrees, our temperature differential is 35, so we have a 40-degree evaporator, saturation temperature of the evaporator, and that should give us about, we have a delta T of 20 degrees, that's temperature split, of 55, and our humidity is 50%. And then we go over here, and we have a 13 plus SEER, and that shows us that we have a 75-degree return air temperature, temperature differential of 30 degrees, and a evaporator temperature of 45, and that still should get us to humidity of 50%. And we have a little bit higher pressure here, 130. But the thing about this is that a warmer evaporator doesn't necessarily dehumidify as well as a colder one. The design temperature difference of the evaporator is how much colder the middle of the evaporator is from the return air, or the box temperature in the refrigeration. The industry rule of thumb for the DDT of a comfort cooling evaporator, R410A or R32, 13 SEER to 20 SEER is 30 degrees with a tolerance of 5 degrees for the system that require 400 CFM per ton. Superheat and subcooling requirements are in the condenser installation instructions. So typical 1320 SEER AC system, let's start with your low side, which is also called back pressure, suction pressure. We know the higher the SEER rating, the larger the evaporator and condenser coils will be. Obviously, the condenser coil is larger, but the evaporator coil is also larger by a ratio to, than with the condenser coil is large, made larger, and by ratio, the evaporator coil is made larger also. Thermal expansion valve metering device on this system. At design operating conditions, indoor air 75 degrees, outdoor air 95, and 50% humidity. The evaporator is designed to be a certain number of degrees colder, and in this case, it's 30 degrees. This is known, as design temperature difference. And this design temperature difference will stay the same under all load conditions at the rated air CFM airflow. Do not confuse design temperature difference with delta T. Delta T equals the return air temp minus the supply air temp. That's your delta T. The design temperature difference, obviously, is the difference between the return air and the coil temperature. And the delta T is the difference across the coil and air temperature. The inlet air temp and the outlet air temp. And temperature split across the coil can range from 15 to 22. If you have, a lot of times people say it's 18 to 22, but if you have high humidity, you can end up down here around 15. So the evaporator is designed to be 30 degrees colder than the return air on this 13 to 20 SEER 410A system. So our return air is 75. The evaporator coil temperature difference, design temperature difference is 30. That's a saturation temperature of 45. So we have our saturation temperature, which is, the middle of the coil on both sides, and that's what our gauges read also. But since we don't have a gauge on this, but we have a temperature, we'll just go to our temperature chart, temperature pressure chart, and we'll convert our calculated saturation temperature to pressure. And as you can see, we're between 44 and 46 because we're at 45 degrees. So we would have a suction pressure of 130 psig, pounds per square inch gauge. So if we change that up, if the temperature in the space was 90 degrees, your pressure would be, we would go return air temp is 90 degrees, the evaporator coil design temperature differential is 30 degrees, so our saturation temperature is 60 degrees. And again, we would go back to our PT chart, and a saturation temperature of 60 degrees would be 170 psig. So you see that we still have that 30 degree differential across the line as long as we have the correct airflow. Now let's move over to the condenser side of the system. Condensers do not always follow conventions. Manufacturers will differ in the compressor selection, metering device, required subcooling, and temperature rise according to their own design to meet the capacity and energy use requirements. Note, if they can accomplish the same rejection of heat at a lower temperature differential and pressure, there is less work done by the compressor. In practice, it's best to benchmark the condenser performance at installation. That way, if the manufacturer's information is not available to make future evaluations of the condenser performance, you have a reference. But I have seen this many times that you think that the condenser design temperature differential is 20 degrees and it's not even close. So, you want to keep that in mind. So measuring the actual condenser split is pretty easy. You're just going to take the condenser air discharge temperature, the condenser air inlet temperature, and subtract the inlet from the outlet, and you've got your actual condenser split. And here we have a couple of scenarios and this is just showing you what I was talking about. The condensing temperature over ambient. So we know that, this one says it's 25, and if that's so, we would have a saturation temperature of 120. And this one, condenser split 20 degrees. And we see here we have 95-degree outdoor air entering the condenser, and the saturation point to the elevated 20 degrees that it needs so it can reject heat makes it 115-degree saturation temperature. And then there's also 95 degrees with 15-degree split. It's 110-degree saturation temperature. So that's why I say I would always, depending on what your pressure is, but if you try to do that with, say you think it's a 20-degree split and it's not, and you're lower, try it with do the calculation again with 15 or even 10 and see where you are in there. Because, like I say, the condensers of today do not follow the convention. If they can use a lower design temperature differential, they will, and they don't publish that. They just do it. So the condenser's saturation temperature is designed to be 20 degrees warmer than the outdoor ambient temperature. So we have an outdoor ambient temperature of 95, condenser temperature of 20, condenser design of 20, so that's 115 degrees again. And so we need to convert that. And if we come over to our chart, we see that it's 390 degrees on our chart. Pressure, 390 degrees PSIG. And again, that's 95 outdoor minus the plus the condenser design, 115. Come to our chart, 390 PSIG. If the outdoor ambient temperature changes, the saturation temperature will change accordingly. So if we have an outdoor ambient temperature of 80 degrees and a condenser design differential of 20 degrees, that means that the saturation temperature is 100. If we go to our chart, that shows that it's 316 pounds per square inch gauge converted to the temperature converted to a pressure. So here we see an R32 example, and these are the units that these are for. and I'll show you the chart form in a minute. But pressure's a little bit different. Our operating temperatures are still pretty much the same, and the outdoor air temp and the return temp. But you do see a little bit higher discharge pressures here, or temperature, and so that is a little bit of a difference there. And to find your subcooling, you always just go to the condenser installation instructions for all your charging and subcooling, superheat needs, all of that. You're going to go to your installation manual. You can't stress enough the importance of the installation manuals, the service manuals. So if you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel so that you get all the latest drops. Thanks for watching. And again, you can watch all of our Taz Academy videos at our YouTube site. That's my email